Hi, I am Shawn. Wow, thanks for everyone to come out, and I hope there are no irritated mothers with you being here, so I appreciate that. I did send my mother flowers, but that's in America, so I've got a whole day of padding to get it right. Okay, so the topic that I'm wrangling with today, it's had different titles to it. Sometimes its incarnation has been evolution and politics and science, and how just the study of evolution and how it manifests in bizarre ways and intriguing ways that tend to inhibit how the study and research of evolution or biological processes that are involved with evolution.
Well,
Yes.
20 people coming.
Okay, 20 people coming. Okay. So should I engage my American voice? Okay. I guess I should say that I've given this talk to a variety of audiences. I will mention it a little bit at the end as well. So you're not the first bunch to see this pitch. So hopefully I remember what the heck I'm talking about. So we have a good chance that I may make it through this thing. Okay, so for first of all, who the heck am I? So aside from what you may have heard about me a few weeks ago, if you came to Windsor Park and you heard some colorful tale about Shawn Means, there's some other dimensions. I am from New Mexico, where it's dry and brown. My background is applied mathematics. I went to the University of New Mexico, did my bachelor's, I did my master's. Then I ended up as an intern, and then I was this technical staff member at computational biology group at Sandia National Labs, which is one of the larger Department of Energy labs there in America. Well, let's see if my laptop's going to reboot. What do you think? Do I have Oz? Or just reboot? Okay, so Department of Energy has some very large research facilities. One of them is Sandia National Labs in Albuquerque. Its primary mission is management of the American nuclear weapons stockpile. I didn't do weapons. I had no interest in weapons, but I was doing my master's degree in applied maths at the university, and they gave us internships over the summer. And so I ended up there basically correcting code. I would solve equations and I'd check their codes. And then they discovered that I knew a few things about biology. I was working on a model of a neuron with a physiologist for my master's thesis. And so I ended up just getting a job there, and there was a bunch of money coming out of National Institutes of Health to do computational biology stuff. And science is the noble pursuit of funding. So Sandia was very keen to put me to work because then they could get more money. So they put together this group studying computational biology. And it's about halfway booed up, so I could just keep on talking. Blah, 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 me. Okay, so there's a world-famous mathematical biologist here at the University of Auckland, James Sneed. I met him at a conference when I was running amok in the States doing comp bio stuff. And I was looking for a PhD program, and he convinced me to come to New Zealand. And so that's why I came. I came down to do a PhD in mathematical biology here at University of Auckland. And so if any of you find this an annoying talk at the end, well, you can blame James. Because it's entirely his fault that I moved to New Zealand, and it's not entirely his fault that I'm still here. So I guess one of the things that is mentioned in the slides is a lot of my research is on calcium dynamics. So calcium is a signaling mechanism that's used in biological cells. So right now, there's sensor cells in your ears that are detecting the sound waves coming out of my face. And those sensors, what they're doing is they're responding to those perturbations, and they're releasing calcium. And so the amount of calcium within a cell is used as a trigger mechanism, either for responding to a signal, like say pressure in your ear, on your skin, or it's also a trigger for contraction. And there's machinery that calcium actually binds to the contractile machinery in muscle cells and heart cells that initiates contraction. There's also calcium. When it fires into a neuron, it initiates neurotransmitter release. So right now, you've got calcium going wah, 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 up and down in all your neurons and whatnot. And there may be calcium that's trying to trigger in your muscle cells, trying to get you out the door. So let's just see if you survive and you stay with us. So I hope you stay with us, and my laptop will not reboot again. So this movie here, this is an image, an experimental image of a heart cell, an atrial cell that's been injected with fluorescent dye, and it's being lased with a fluorescence microscope. And what the dye does when it binds to calcium, it fluoresces. There was an electrical stimulation. So they stimulated this little heart cell, and now what it's doing, you're getting all these explosions. What those are called calcium sparks. So you have calcium that's released from intracellular stores inside this heart cell. You get enough of these explosions that coalesce together, and you get formation of a calcium wave. For muscle cells to work properly, especially in the heart, there needs to be a tight coordination between the electrical stimulation, the release of the calcium, and the contraction. And so we were interested in to see what happens when there's a decoupling between the electrical signal and the calcium release and the contraction. You can get arrhythmias, right? So there's no coordination of all the contractions. And actually the surface of a heart when it's having an arrhythmia looks like writhing worms, right? And it's not a very pleasant experience. I don't know, I haven't had one, but so I've been told. So what we were interested in, so that's not me, I didn't do that movie there, that was my collaborator in Maryland. This was a movie from models that we made when I was at Sandia National Labs. So this is just a mathematical virtual computational representation of a heart cell, just a section of it. And we were exploring the impact of the different spatial distributions for these calcium sparks and to see what were those parameters, so how tightly do they need to be together, for instance, before you get a well-organized wavefront that forms out of these things. And I was using the fancy schmancy computers and software that was at Sandia Labs doing stuff like this before I came here. Okay, clear as mud? Okay, so I would love to just talk about calcium all day. Would you guys like to just talk about calcium? Because I could just go on and on. I know a bit about calcium, but that's not what we're here for today, right? So I was going to talk about this evolution thing and politics and science. So first we need a little background on science. How does science work? Science works on criticism. If you have an idea or you have work that you've done, one of the first stages to put your ideas out there is to put it into a peer-reviewed publication. For instance, the Journal of Theoretical Biology. I have a few papers in that journal. Okay, so the whole process, when you submit a manuscript, the journals, they typically ask you, you need to tell us, recommend an editor who can handle it, but particularly name some scientists that know what the heck you're talking about, some experts in the field. So they can do peer review, so they can go through it, they can referee it, they can criticize it, they can say your model's crazy, or you didn't have these parameters right, or this method is wrong, or what about this, what about that? And so you have to jump through these hoops, and you have to appease these reviewers, or the paper doesn't get accepted and does not get published. But that's not all there is. So you can go through the peer-reviewed process, get a paper that's out there, and may subsequent articles that get peer-reviewed and published, they may criticize the other peer-reviewed publication. And so for instance, my PhD was studying gastrointestinal signaling mechanisms. So throughout your guts, there's a steady rhythmic sequence of electrical signals that are generated to keep things moving. And there's a calcium mechanism at the heart of all that. See, calcium, it's everywhere, right, calcium. And there was this gang, Ken Sanders and his group in Reno, Nevada, experimentalists, they cooked up an hypothesis, an idea of what that mechanism was. They approached folks in bioengineering, so these were people that were Auckland bioengineering a few years back. Can you make a mathematical model? Can you test this idea just virtually using computer simulations? And this attracted my interest and my advisor, James Sneed, because, well, we know a little bit about calcium. And so we concocted our own model and we decided to test their ideas. And this is a common thing. You see some publication come out. Well, let's just test it. Let's see if we can get this thing to work. And we couldn't see how it would work. We didn't buy their hypothesis. And in fact, with our results, we could not reproduce a lot of their results. So basically what we did is we put a bullet in the head of their idea, right? So Ken Sanders is not my friend, right? And that whole research group, they don't talk to me. Right, but so that's kind of how the process works. So you've got peer review, then once you can get past peer review, then you've got publications that can disagree with each other. There's also more informal discussions about some of these things. For instance, you can have a publication of a research article that can get criticized just through letters through the editor. And there was a particular instance where some fellows were finding that in DNA, does anyone know what DNA is? Right, it's like high school biology kind of stuff. So DNA, it typically uses phosphorus molecules in it for its structure. And some of these fellows found, hey, it could be using arsenic as well, which is really controversial. And so it was immediately criticized all over the place. This is only preliminary results. These can't confirm anything. There are alternative explanations for this stuff. Their evidence is weak. Their conclusion is not well supported. These are all just like letters to the editor saying, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. But interestingly, out of all these sequences, there was one of the criticisms that came out automatically discarding results inconsistent with decades of work, if generally applied, would cause us to overlook most valid advances in science. So in other words, it's saying just because something doesn't agree with decades of work doesn't mean it's bunk. Doesn't mean we have to be careful, right? If there's a lot of weight of evidence in another way, we need to be cautious about it, but not just throw things away. So that's the general procedure, right? If you don't develop a thick skin doing research, you're in the wrong line of work, right? Because criticism is fundamental to the whole thing. Okay, so this is, we want to talk about evolution. So dial back the clock a little bit to 1970. In a journal called the American Biology Teacher, which is about pedagogy, about teaching, and so forth. There was this fellow, D.T. Gish, that he published an article that criticized evolution. And it basically said the dogmatic fashion in which evolution is usually taught in our schools and universities amounts to indoctrination, and it is as much the teaching of religion as if the theory of origins was restricted to the book of Genesis. So he's basically saying biology students are being brainwashed with evolution. And there was a response, lo and behold, right? So someone responded. And it was none other than Ernst Mayr, one of the heavyweights of biology of the 20th century. And his response was basically talking about mathematicians and physicists that were criticizing evolution. He was saying they just don't know what they're talking about. You don't understand biology. There was a discussion, that's the key point to take, back in 1970. Now fast forward a bit to 2004. There's this journal called the Proceedings of the Biological Society of Washington. It's run by the Smithsonian in America. There was an editor, Richard Sternberg. He approved the peer review process for this thing, and in 2004, he approved the publication of an article that criticized evolution and dared to propose systems were designed, that there's a hand of a designer of some kind. And so later, there was such an uproar over this that the journal, they retracted the article. But not only that, with all this stuff in here, they retracted the article, but not only that, the journal did not publish a rebuttal. So there's no discussion. So not only that, they tried to eliminate the fact that it was published, this idea, but they even eliminated the discussion. So there's no debate. So they're just erasing the history of this discussion. And one of the things that they invoked is they were saying, well, the reason why we can't publish this is because the AAAS, the Association for Advancement in Science, they said that all this stuff about intelligent design, that it's all bunk and it shouldn't be permitted any justification or no validity and so forth. But these guidelines actually refer to science education in public schools. It doesn't say anything about publication in a scientific journal, right? This journal is not an educational publication. It's a scientific journal for publication of scientific work. Go figure, right? So remember this? Back in 1970, devil's advocate, right? And what D.T. Gish had to say, this dogmatic fashion, indoctrination, people being brainwashed. What's happening here? Right? This discussion is over. What you're seeing is not open debate and criticism. You're seeing destruction of ideas. You're seeing a propaganda technique to jam competing ideas. If there's no competing ideas, if there's nothing else out there that says maybe there's an alternative, maybe there's something else, well, maybe the only idea is the one that's been protected. Right? That's the only one that seems to be valid. And that's precisely what's happening. But you know, there's more. It isn't just the fact that the publication was retracted and there was no rebuttal, there was no discussion. This poor fellow lost his job. So the editor, he was basically forced out of his position. And so there was an article in the Wall Street Journal was talking about this. What's going on? Whether or not intelligent design can be presented to adult scientific professionals is another question to the whole educational thing. And this fellow, he went to the congressional office and said, I'm being discriminated against, and I've had my career destroyed because of what happened in this thing. And so they investigated, and they basically said that retaliation came in many forms. It came in the form of attempts to change your working conditions. They basically put him in the basement with the janitors and took away his scan card. Right? Yes. Oh, thank you for your editorial work. Try not to make a mess in the janitor's closet. Right? How would you feel? And then they also smeared him. His professional competence was attacked. Misinformation was disseminated throughout the institute and beyond. The man's biology career in biology field was destroyed, basically. And so what's happening here? The ostensible motivation in doing this right? And also, removing the rebuttal, not allowing Meyer, who was the fellow that had the intelligent design paper, is ostensibly preventing a religious attack on science. There's a philosopher of science, Thomas Nagel. He's based at Harvard. He's an atheist fellow, and he published an article talking about this intelligent design in public education back in 2008. And he talks quite a bit about this. What's going on? And he says how the political urge to defend science education against the threats of religious orthodoxy has resulted in a counter-orthodoxy, supported by bad arguments, a tendency to overstate scientific claims of evolutionary theory. Skeptics about the theory are seen as so dangerous and so disreputable, they must be denied any shred of legitimate interest. That's what happened to Sternberg. So has anyone heard of Richard Dawkins? Some fellow published a few books or something, and he makes these amazing statements. It is absolutely safe to say that if you meet someone who claims not to believe in evolution, that person is ignorant, stupid, or insane. Right? Oh, I see. So it doesn't leave too much room to maneuver for many people. And then later, there was a Chinese fellow that went to America, and he made this observation. In China, we criticize Darwin, but not the government. In America, you criticize the government, but not Darwin. Right? So John Lennox, the Christian apologist mathematician at Oxford. Why is it only in connection with this area of intellectual endeavor have I ever heard an eminent scientist say in a public lecture, you must not question evolution? I mean, surely, a little skepticism is in order. Can you think about the things that are presented to you? No! Just obey! Listen! Regurgitate facts as I give them out. Stop thinking so much. Oh, I imagine if I did that to my math students. Stop thinking so much. Oh, wait a minute. I think we've lost the plot. Nagel. One of the disturbing things about the public debate is that scientists engaged in it sometimes write as if the idea of problems with the theory are just unthinkable. Right? And entertaining any doubts is wondering whether the earth is flat. This is a scientific theory that makes sweeping claims about things that cannot be directly observed. Has anyone invented a time machine yet? No. Hurry up. Right? There could be scientific evidence against this. Right? And so Dawkins, once again, he makes these claims. Evolution is a fact, no reputable scientist disputes it. Now, I haven't clarified precisely what he means by that statement, but in general, it's just not true. Some scientists that are quite reputable don't fully embrace evolution as Dawkins would present it. Right? His particular brand of evolution that he thinks everyone should believe, or you're stupid, ignorant, or insane. Some aspects of evolution are indeed factually observed. We see it happen, right? Go to a hospital and talk to nurses about resistant bacteria. Other aspects are not. Some of these sweeping claims, these are the debatable points. So, I didn't bring the books. So I have this book. Mathematical Physiology. So did you guys all buy the textbook? Are you ready for your test? Yay, let's take a test. Okay, so I should say, so James Sneed, if you can see it, so that's my PhD advisor. He's the co-author of this textbook. But I don't want to talk about that James, I want to talk about this James, Jim Keenan. So let's see, is the interwebs going to work? So let's go have a look at Jim Keener's webpage. What are you looking at? Oh, you're looking at what I'm doing. Okay. This may or may not be a good thing. It's thinking about it. Oh, there we go. Okay. James Keenan. I call him Jim, Professor Jim, because I know Jim. So interesting how he hasn't updated his schedule yet. So this is his page, and I do like this fact that he doesn't do mornings. So I can relate to that. He's a mathematical physiologist, obviously. He wrote a book about it, right? Let's see. Let's just have a look at this man's publications. Okay, so he's still active. He got an eLife paper that just came out. SciAm journals. He is a mathematician, right? And so we can go. And so it's stuff like this that makes a postdoc like me like, yeah, I suck. Right, just keeps going.
Oh, wow.
We're in the 90s now. The 80s. The 70s should pop up here. Okay, the 70s. Oh, here we go. His first article, he did some partial differential equation stuff. right? I bet George's CV looks like this. It goes on and on, right? Yeah, Jim's renowned in the field. He's a heavyweight in mathematical biology. He also really loved Utah. Has anyone been to Utah? Right, lots of skiing, right? Lots of biking. Whenever he comes here for a visit, the man rides his bicycle all over Auckland. He just chews up those mountains and spits them out. He's a fishing man. He's also an evangelical Christian. Which was fascinating to me. When I first met him, I gave a talk at Utah, and I went to his office. I was like, "Professor Jim, can I talk to you?" "Oh, sure, come on in." I was like, "I hear you do Bible study. What kind?" "Salt Lake City, right? Mormon country." And he's like, "Evangelical? Is that okay?" And I said, "Sweet! We can talk." Yeah. So that's Professor Jim. So I mentioned all that for a reason. Okay, so it just so happens that there came out this open letter published in the New York Times, I guess it was 2008 or something like that. And it was basically just this statement: a scientific dissent from Darwinism. We are skeptical of claims for the ability of random mutation and natural selection to account for the complexity of life. Careful examination of the evidence for Darwinian theory should be encouraged. Honestly, I don't think there's anything controversial about this statement. I think it's very scientifically sound. We should be skeptical. We should examine this thing. There's a tremendous amount of weight put on this little mechanism: random mutation, generating information, sieved through natural selection. The idea is that it generated all life and all complexity. That's a lot of weight to put on one little machine. Well, if you look at the signatories to this thing, so there's Professor Jim Keener, University of Utah, author of these two books. I really wanted to bring this one because I hate it. I have such issues with this book that Jim wrote. Before I knew him, I studied this book during my master's, and about 12 of us and our professor, we studied this for a year, and we found all these lovely typos. And when you're wrangling with trying to solve a maths question for like 4 or 5 days, and you're banging your head on a wall, and you're pulling out your hair, and you're screaming and you're shouting, and you come back to it, and you go, "Oh, there's a typo." He used to, for Jim's credit, he used to give a bounty. If you found the typo and it wasn't already discovered, you got $1. Yeah, we didn't get anything out of that class. Did learn a lot about typos. So why would Professor Jim feel compelled to sign this thing? Why bother? Well, so, like I said, I know Jim. I see him a lot at mathematical biology meetings. And years back, I went to Rio de Janeiro, and that was an adventure. This is just an email conversation where he talked about that he barely survived Rio, and he had inconveniences regarding large amounts of money that still aren't completely resolved, but oh well, it's only money. I guess it is Rio de Janeiro. And so I was just asking about evolution stuff. We tried to talk, it's a typical conference. And he's also a big shot. He gives the keynote speeches, right? I mean, I don't. He does. And so me trying to get a slice of his time could be a challenge. But he's like, I get into trouble whenever I talk about my doubts. So this bit. Okay, so I enjoy the discussion about evolution, but only rarely find scientifically astute people who are open to consider that Darwinism may not have all the answers. Okay, so he's told me stories of how he's given the keynote speech to a math biology conference, and he sits down, he's having lunch with random people, as you do at a conference. And he specifically remembered a Russian fellow, and evolution came up, and Jim was just like, yeah, I don't quite buy the large-scale stuff. I think there's other mechanisms. I think we need to look at this in a different light. And he goes, are you Christian? He's like, yeah. Oh, you must be a creationist. He got labeled a kook on the spot. And this fellow immediately, all the history and all the publications and all the weight of who Jim was immediately thrown out the window. He's like, the guy wouldn't have anything to do with me anymore. Interesting. So why sign dissent from Darwin? Questioning evolution can cost you your scientific career, that's why. The Sternberg case is one of several examples. And when I was at UNM, I was one of the first math people to do a biology project, a biology thesis. And so I cobbled together a supervisory team of a mathematician and a physiologist. And I had a really cool physiology professor that supervised me. And one time I was just talking and just like Christianity came up or church or something. I said something. Oh, I was in a church. I don't know. And then he was like, hey, what about the evolution thing? What do you think about that? Well, I buy the small stuff, but the big scale I think is kind of an open question. And he didn't confront me on it or anything. You know what he said? He was like, be careful. People in biology departments get tenure denied. They lose their jobs. They lose their funding. And Jim himself, keep it under your hat. Right? And this is just also coming from Jim Keener, he's such a heavyweight. So what are we seeing here? So I have an image to hopefully illustrate this. Right, for those of you can see. So Galileo suggests that the Earth revolves around the sun, and so I think this is Galileo, and this is the Pope, or Cardinal, or maybe I got him backwards. Is that what a cardinal wears? Right? And Inquisition found him guilty of heresy. And we see people that are challenging some sort of orthodoxy, and they're being punished for it. Now, I've heard for some people, it's like, well, it's only those kooky Christians that have a bias, that have a motivation for questioning this stuff, and that's why they do it. That's not true. It's not only the fringe elements. There's this, oh, that's a lot of text, isn't it? So there's this group called the Third Way that are trying to navigate between what they think are the pitfalls of creationism and Neo-Darwinianism. These are a bunch of researchers that say interesting things like Neo-Darwinianism, which is the natural selection sieved through, random generation of information sieved through natural selection, ignores important evolutionary processes, such as a whole list of things. Moreover, some Neo-Darwinianists have elevated natural selection into some creative force that solves all these difficult evolutionary problems without a real empirical basis. And that's what I've seen in some articles. I've read some articles, well, evolution just found a way. Well, how? Be specific. Science is not about maybe. It's not hand-wavy. No, that's for mathematicians that are trying to figure out a typo. I don't know. It did something, right? And along the signatories for this group on this webpage is Dennis Noble. So Dennis Noble is a heavyweight in physiology again. So this man was a pioneer doing computational cardiology stuff in the 80s. And he was also heavily influential, worked a lot with the director for Auckland Bioengineering, Peter Hunter. And I got to meet him briefly at a meeting in the States ages ago, and I had no idea who it was. I was like, oh, I don't know, okay, that's right. And then I go and look at him, oh my gosh, he's like a real big name. Now he's an emeritus professor, and he's gotten interested in some evolutionary stuff, and some fairly recent interviews with him where he's criticizing this modern synthesis of Neo-Darwinianism. He's saying, oh, well, I don't think that random change and natural selection doesn't exist. It's not a possible mechanism. But it becomes one of many mechanisms, right? And this whole idea is a gene-centered view of evolution, that the information flows out from the genes and it doesn't go back in, right? The modern synthesis has got causality wrong. These are some pretty profound criticisms. And he's saying there's experimental evidence that exists for various forms and various mechanisms. He's basically saying we need to look closely at this. He's skeptical of these claims of this Darwinian synthesis explaining all life on the planet. So how do you think he was received? The people, they said, you're so right! Yes, we need to reconsider all these things, right? So some of you may have heard of a fellow named Jerry Coyne. So Jerry Coyne, he runs a blog, he's an evolutionary biologist, he runs a blog called Why Evolution is True. So take a wild guess what his response was. Right, and so he had this long blog where he's basically saying that Dennis Noble, you should butt out. You don't know what the heck you're talking about. And he basically said, however famous he is in physiology, he's a blundering tyro when it comes to evolutionary biology. And so it wasn't until I gave this talk last year in Taronga, and I was like, what does that mean? Does anyone know what a blundering tyro is? Want to take a guess? Well, someone told me it's like a novice. You really don't know what you're doing. And so it was interesting, as I was looking through his criticisms, so I found one of the comments, I don't know who the heck it was, but it's like, well, I don't think I'd call him a blundering tyro, but some of his points, his criticisms, they require analysis, they require attention. But this is a typical response from some of the more hardened evolutionary biologists. Which is interesting, as Nagel talked about some of this to some degree. Skepticism about the standard evolutionary model is not limited to defenders of intelligent design. The skeptics may be right, they may be wrong. But even if one merely regards the randomness of the sources of variation as an open question, it seems to call for the consideration of alternatives. Right? And this is not just a recent phenomenon. There's things keep popping up. Like I said, in the 70s, Ernst Mayr told all these mathematicians and physicists, you don't know what you're talking about. There was this whole conference called A Mathematical Challenge to Evolution. In 1995, this fellow Kaufman, he talks about a lot of the order in organisms may not be the result of this selection thing at all. There might be self-organizing systems, right? Another mechanism, right? A question unanswered by two well-established pillars of evolutionary theory, selection and heredity, is whether, given all these changes that happen, enough of them, they surface to the phenotype, right? So there's a genotype, the information, and the phenotype is the stuff that you see. So this is my phenotype, my hair and my nose. That's my phenotype. So that's the stuff that natural selection works on. And so this is talking about how much of the genetic change actually gets out into the world that selection can operate on. Right? So if we go back a little bit further, the science thing. So there's this fellow Chamberlain, who's a glaciologist way back in the day. He had this very interesting thing that he said in the end of the 19th century, talking about the difference between a ruling theory and working hypotheses. The working hypothesis differs from a ruling theory in that it's used as a means of determining facts. Under the method of the ruling theory, the stimulus is directed to finding facts to support the theory. So say if you're looking for evolutionary stuff, you look for evolutionary data that fits the theory. He's suggesting that that's not the way to do it. That we need multiple angles of attack. The method of multiple working hypotheses is urged. The effort is to bring up into view every rational explanation of some phenomenon. Its value lies largely in suggestiveness of lines of inquiry that might otherwise be overlooked. As an illustration, consider the phenomenal influence of Darwinian hypothesis that it's exerted. Being a single working hypothesis may lead investigation along a single line to the neglect of all others. So we might be missing a lot. And this is coming from a guy back in the 19th century. So, you know, I kind of got into maths and biology because I saw patterns. Right? Do you see a pattern? All right, there's a pattern here. The rejection of intelligent design, if you get back to ID stuff itself, appears not to be because of its criticism of evolutionary theory. But there's another dimension to intelligent design. So back to Nagel. Those who would not take any amount of evidence against evolutionary theory as evidence for intelligent design seem to be assuming something about intelligent design. What's the status of this thing? Is it scientific? Instead, it seems to be a basic assumption about how the world works, basically some kind of naturalism, like it's invalid to even mention some sort of design because you're invoking something outside the system. Or at least that's the impression. So, you know, naturalism is an ism. A philosophical viewpoint, according to which everything arises from natural properties and causes, supernatural, spiritual stuff is completely discounted. It's just from the get-go. It's just not even a valid thing to consider. And that dovetails nicely into that unknown fellow, Richard Dawkins. Whoever the heck he is, you keep bumping into his stuff. An atheist is someone who believes there's nothing beyond the natural physical world, no supernatural creature, creative intelligence lurking behind it all. There's something that appears to lie beyond the natural. We hope eventually to understand it, to consume it into the natural world. So I ask you, is this a logical thing? Is there a purely logical justification for this view? Is it just a belief? What's the evidence for this? And it's interesting how some naturalists will, maybe accidentally, have a slip and something comes out. So years ago in 1997, this fellow Richard Lewontin was reviewing a Carl Sagan book, and he had this to say: "We have a prior commitment to materialism. We are forced by our a priori adherence to material causes that produce material explanations, no matter how counterintuitive. Materialism is absolute. We cannot allow a divine foot in the door." What an interesting statement. So what happens if the data leads you to this? If you start looking at evidence that contradicts your theory, we can't let the foot in. Thank you, Monty Python. Right? So if you dare to challenge evolution, you are stupid, insane, or ignorant. This is you. I'm Cletus. Do I have any Simpsons fans in the room? Right, yeah. On the first 6 seasons, I have them memorized. I can recite whole episodes. I'll try not to do that now. Stay focused. Okay, right. So Lewontin, he also said this: "We must state clearly that evolution is a fact, it's not a theory. Birds arose from non-birds, humans from non-humans. No person who pretends to have any understanding of the natural world can deny these facts any more than denying that the earth is round, it rotates on its axis, revolves around the sun." I'm just like, these are really extreme statements. It's like, wow, really? Okay, so back to Thomas Nagel. Suppose naturalism is true. Suppose there's nothing supernatural at all. As a matter of logical necessity, you are forced into following some kind of evolutionary account that must be given for life, apart altogether from any evidence which may be offered to support it. Right? Because you've assumed that. You're forced to make this conclusion. If all we have is matter and energy, the forces of physics, then there's only one option. Matter and energy together with the forces of nature over time produce life that is evolution of some kind. Right? And John Lennox has a comment about this as well. There may be so much a priori philosophical pressure. So is everyone familiar with the term a priori? Or it's kind of like axiomatic. Like it's like your initial assumption. There's really no evidence to support it, but you start with this and everything follows. And so when you have this a priori assumption, it's like a keystone that holds together everything you start working from. It's foundational. And you don't question it because it's a priori, right? Regardless of the evidence to or for or against. So all this philosophical pressure based on that initial assumption from a reigning naturalistic or materialistic paradigm, aspects of the theory may not be subjected to the wide-ranging, rigorous, self-critical analysis which is or should be characteristic of all science. Remember all that stuff I talked about at the beginning? I could submit a journal article, oh, they got a peer review, I have to jump through hoops for their reviewers, okay, fine. Yay, I got a paper, maybe I'll get a grant. Good luck. Right? And then subsequent publications, right? Oh, or your theory was wrong, or we couldn't reproduce your results, right? Etc. Doesn't seem to be working here. Why? It's because for some individuals, they have a prior commitment to materialism. They're forced through their a priori adherence, and they're on rails. Right? So it doesn't matter how much evidence you pile onto them, for or against. They're on rails. Right? In some ways, we see a competition. So this Wall Street Journal article talking about Sternberg, Darwinism by contrast is an essential ingredient in secularism, an aggressive quasi-religious faith without a deity. That Sternberg case seems in many ways an instance of one religion persecuting a rival, demanding loyalty from anyone who enters one of its churches like the Natural Museum of Natural History. Bend the knee or get out. Right? That's basically it. And Nagel continues, intelligent design would be more plausible to someone who believed in God. The opposite is just as true. Evolutionary theory is a complete explanation of life is more plausible to someone who does not. Hey, does anyone know Far Side? Yeah. Gary Larson, I wish he was still producing things. So do you see the difference? You can take the same data, the same information, and how you approach it, you can get completely different conclusions. Because it's the way you look at it. It's the framework that you brought to it. It's those a priori assumptions. Nagel. Either both of them are science or neither. The ground for exclusion of intelligent design must be that it is hopelessly bad science, but no such refutation has even been offered. Instead, there's all these hand-wavy speculative proposals about how the problems posed might be handled by evolutionary theory, declarations that no hypothesis involving divine intervention counts as science, assurances that evolutionary theory is not inconsistent with the existence of God, etc. So is the opposition between these really an opposition between scientific rationality on one hand and unreasoned dogmatism on the other? No, there's something else going on. Okay, so I brought these lovely seats, right, so these little things, and speakers. So hopefully it's loud enough. So here's the unknown fellow, Dawkins or something. And here's John Lennox. Anyone know John Lennox? Or heard of him? Right, so he's a Christian apologist, mathematician at Oxford. He was debating Richard Dawkins. Let's see, turn this up all the way. So if it's too loud, just imagine I'm playing drums.
Whereas we only need to use the word faith when there isn't any evidence.
I presume you've got faith in your wife. Is there any evidence for that?
Yes,
Yes.
Plenty of evidence. Let's generalize it. Never mind about my wife. Let's let
It's the same with Bible, Richard. It's the same with Bible.
Let's say that in general, how do we know that somebody loves us? Okay?
Yes.
You can use a word faith for that if you like, but it's not the right use of the word because you know why your wife loves you because of all sorts of little signs, little catches in the voice, little looks in the eye. That's the evidence that it is.
Yes, that's
evidence.
right.
That's perfectly good evidence. That's not faith.
Yes, it is.
Well, okay, then we're coming down to pure semantics.
Yeah, it's like, Lennox is saying there's evidence for having faith in his wife. When you agree, and that's what Dawkins is dancing around. He's saying, but that's the wrong use of the word faith, right? So faith, complete trust or confidence of something or something, right? And typically, it's also applied to a strong belief in God or the doctrines of a religion. And so what Dawkins is trying to do, he's playing semantics. He's playing, no, faith is only appropriately used when there's no evidence, when it's blind faith. And Lennox is saying, no, that faith is an appropriate use of the word when it's evidentiary based. There's the evidence for faith that is wide. And some of this is tied up within just different worldviews.
Because atheism is a faith, of course, as well.
It's not.
Of course it is.
What's this response?
Don't you believe it? The issue is to do with two alternative.
Okay.
Is to do with two alternative explanations of the universe, and each of us have our faith. I believe there is a God behind this universe. You believe the universe is all there is. The cosmos is all there is.
Yes.
So do you think Richard Dawkins believes that atheism is a faith? No. He refuses to apply the word faith to atheism because he wants it to be, it's just facts. It's just a grab bag of facts. It's just a collection of scientifically established pieces of data. There's no faith involved whatsoever. Well, I disagree. Right? Just like what Lennox was saying. The statement that the universe is all there is, that's a statement of faith. Right? Based on what? I mean, you can make arguments. You can say, well, there's evidence. Well, look at how successful science has been, that we figured out some naturalistic explanations for things like light, right? Or fire, and whatnot. But by the same token, what if you flip it to the other side? So is faith in the Christian God, is it purely blind? Is there any evidence for it? Man, I sure hope so. I got the wrong religion, right? There's piles and piles of evidence. And I guess the point of all this, they're both faiths, and they both can be evidentiary based. And instead of playing games with words like Dawkins does, no, your faith is blind and mine is fact based. That's just a gross mischaracterization. And I would say that that's a common tactic that Dawkins and some of his ilk do, is they just frame things in a completely unfair way. Well, no, you're blind and you just believe in nonsense. Okay, so philosophically, there's been some interesting statements about just knowledge itself. Bertrand Russell, big shot philosopher of the 20th century, made this interesting statement. Whatever knowledge is attainable must be attained by scientific methods, and what science can't discover, you just can't know. And so I created this blob using PowerPoint, and I called it Omega. And so let's let Omega, this blob, be the set of scientific knowledge. So like whatever is inside this blob, science. Whatever's outside the blob, and that's a mathematical term. And so we have the complement, so there's a name, like, so if you have a set here, the complement of the set, the outside of it, is an empty set. So there's nothing in it. Okay, so what is this claim based on? Right, like I said, the success of the scientific method. Well, we figured out a bunch of stuff that might have been a complete mystery to people a few millennia ago. Dismissal of existence or for phenomena, like the ghosts and whatnot that you see on television. Maybe it's not a real thing. Let's get evidence for that. Okay. But it just so happens that this statement is meta-scientific. It's self-contradictory. Right? It says that the statement itself is not a product of science, so we actually don't know a dang thing about this. Right? That's not me, that's John Lennox. So he came up with that bit. So I want to take you on a little analogous adventure. Okay, so once again, let's consider this set. But this time, let's call it the set of real numbers. How many remember different kinds of numbers? Like integers, natural numbers, ratios. Real numbers are the numbers that are familiar. Like it gives you distance and weight, right? How much do I weigh? How tall am I? How much money I got? Right? Real numbers. So let's just consider omega the set of real numbers. And I give you some number x sitting in that set of real numbers. So you know it's a real number. And so then I give every high school student's favorite, okay, sweet. So this, does that look like this? Has anyone seen this in their lives? Right, what do we call this thing? The secondary high school teacher, don't say it. A quadratic equation, right? Quadratic because it's talking about a quadrilateral, it's a square, right? Does anyone remember how to solve this thing? Does anyone own that cool t-shirt you see at parties that all the kids are wearing? Right, the quadratic equation, right? Right, so this gives you the roots.
Yes.
Unfortunately, if this bit in here is negative, if b squared minus 4ac is 0, All this fancy schmancy notation says there does not exist an x in the set of real numbers such that you can solve this. That's all because what you're asking is the square root of a negative number. Doesn't make sense in the world of reals, because what you're asking is, okay, so what's the area of this thing? So it's got this length times this length, and I square it and I get a negative number. What does that mean? That means this isn't a black hole. Right? Doesn't make sense. There's no such thing as negative area in our universe. If you find out what it means, let me know. Right? This was a problem that was bumped into for centuries, for all kinds of mathematicians and surveyors, engineers, and whatnot, trying to figure out what does this mean. This x squared equals minus 1 makes no sense. The concept was completely baffling. So you know what people used to do when they were solving these things? They were saying, still makes sense, throw it away, right, try again, do it differently, do something else. Okay. So until someone came along and had the idea, well, we don't know what it is, but let's just call it I, some number I squared equals minus 1. And it was called imaginary numbers. Anyone heard of imaginary numbers? I'm sure some of you, yeah, imaginary numbers. The name stuck because it was ridiculed by René Descartes. It's like, these are imaginary, they cannot be real. Right? And the name stuck. And so they're called imaginary numbers. Right? But until someone defined that thing, whatever the heck it is, if it lives in a black hole or whatever these things come from, this simple little quadratic equation could not be solved for centuries. Right? Until you expanded the world to include imaginary numbers in this thing called complex numbers. So you looked at a larger world. Right? So let's see. So what we did is we have a world of real numbers that's familiar. We can measure, we can get length, density, all that stuff. And it's embedded in a larger space called the complex. Real numbers are a subset of a larger space of numbers called the complex. And the notational way is just say R is a subset of C. Right? And these were all basically discovered not by some great mathematician or whatever, as a surveyor. There's a Dutch fellow, Wessel, in the 18th century. All he did is he just looked at it differently. Well, maybe these things are rotations into another dimension. And he expanded the dimensionality of the universe that we were considering, that we live in. These things are real, in a sense, right? Not mathematically real, but to us, they're real, they're just weird. They found a utility in a variety of fields, including fluid dynamics, signal processing, electrical engineers, any electrical engineering people, right? So if you fool around with any electrical engineering stuff, you got eyes all over the place, right? Not only that, there was no way to solve huge classes of problems in mathematics unless you expanded the number system you were playing with to a larger system. Does anyone want to know more about that? Go to the board. Right? Anyway. Statements such as Russell's or Dawkins presume that nothing exists outside the realm accessible by scientific means. Why say otherwise? There may be phenomena inaccessible to the scientific method. As Nagel calls them, non-law governed causes, singular events. We can see the results of some singularity in the universe, or we have no idea how it got there. The scientifically accessible world may be a subset of another world. Scientifically accessible, another world with its own properties that are not directly inferable from the scientifically accessible. Right? And this is just an analogy, but this is the one that I often run to when I get confronted by this. Not only that, the humanities itself may also disagree with Russell's assertion, since other philosophers, logicians, historians, poets, artists, all struggle with knowledge in different forms. So I want to talk about, just briefly, a very interesting story that came out in the 70s by this Polish fellow, Stanislaw Lem, Solaris. It was later turned into an incredible 3-hour movie by a Russian guy, Tarkovsky. So if you have 3 hours to kill, and you can stay awake, it's an intense movie. And it was later Hollywoodized by the Soderbergh clan with George Clooney. And interestingly, how this incarnation ignored the primary character of the story. It was a planet. It was an ocean planet. It was a science fiction story. These explorers go into space. And they discover this planet that's all covered in ocean. And as they're descending to investigate further, out of the ocean erupted these fantastic and gigantic forms the size of New Zealand. And they happen to correspond to the thoughts in the researcher's heads, the explorer's head. One guy was thinking about his baby, and a baby emerged. out of the ocean. They could land on them and walk around with them and freak out. They sent more explorers to research this thing. What is this crazy planet? And as they were orbiting around this thing, the researchers were collecting data on this thing. Apparitions would appear of dead loved ones. They could touch them and talk to them and interact with them. And they started realizing this planet is alive. And so why did Lim write this? I mean, it's a fascinating story. I recommend just reading it just for kicks and giggles. Right? He said, I wanted to create a vision of a human encounter with something that certainly exists, but in a way perhaps that cannot be reduced to human concepts, ideas, or images. A tremendous mystery, something that is just not graspable by science. And so for me, that's one of the images of science, crashing up against an immovable obstacle. Right? No matter how clever, no matter how smart we are, no matter how powerful a scientific method is, I'm willing to bet there's some mysteries that are just not going to bed. And a lot of this has to do also with just who we are. Right? We as human beings, even scientists with the lab coats and everything else, we are not objective. Right? Innocent, unbiased observation is a total myth. The philosophy of science has been dedicated to disclosing that a given or pure observation, that's a pure fiction. You don't just approach data and get a pure deduction from it. It's because you always have to have some theory, some framework to interpret the data. No serious student of epistemology any longer takes this naive view of science as some induction process from theoretically unorganized observations. There can be no observations without an apparatus or pre-existing theory. Right? You need a framework. You need to look at these things. So what I'm saying is that it's not necessarily bad. It's something to be aware of. Okay, so when I did my PhD, I had to write my own code, which I fought against. I didn't want to write my own software to do my simulations and generate results. Because I made dumb mistakes, a lot. And so when I was writing my code, I discovered new law of physics. Wow, I get some fascinating results. I take it to my professor and he looks at him. No, you just got a bug in your code. Thought I had a new law of physics. No, it's just a stupid thing you did in your code. Just go fix that. Why? Why did we know that? Because we had an expectation. We were just like, this is the physical thing that we're simulating. It should make sense within that framework. It's not a bad thing. It's something to be aware of. The only way to make no assumptions of a religious nature would be to admit that the empirical evidence may suggest different conclusions depending on what religious belief one starts with, and that the evidence does not by itself settle which one of those beliefs is correct. And evolution in and of itself is a singularity. It's a lightning rod. Scientific debate, criticism, refinement of the theory is compromised by the religious and philosophical implication it holds for theism or atheism. For some people like Jerry Coyne, if you dare to question it, they get so upset it's because it's like you're criticizing the Quran to a Muslim. It's a central tenet of their faith, their worldview. The Sternberg case had his career destroyed, right? Because he dared to facilitate publication of an intelligent design paper. Professor Jim's comments, getting into trouble for a distinguished professor. I've given presentations on evolution. At another church I was at, I talked about evolution stuff. It was promoted on Facebook. I got attacked. Personally, people were saying, well, you can't be a real scientist if you're questioning this stuff. Well, you weren't even at the talk. You're in Australia. How the heck do you know what I was talking about? And I've seen job opportunities evaporate. I had a job opportunity in Australia by a fellow I know who was running a large research facility that I know him from way back when I was at San Diego. I was finishing my PhD. He's like, oh man, send me your CV. We'll bring it. Why don't you come over? I'll introduce you to the people. We'll get you going. And so then I give the evolution talk, and he sees all this stuff, and all of a sudden he's like, well, you should go somewhere else. Right, that door closed. And just this talk. I gave this talk to a bunch of atheists, the atheist group. What was it? Reasons and Something Society. Reasons and Science Society at University of Auckland. And it was astonishing just how they were so defensive in dealing with me. At first they asked me, can you defend intelligent design? Well, I'm not necessarily a proponent of intelligent design. Oh, what do you want to talk about? Well, I can talk about this evolution thing and how weird it is in science. And they're like, well, how can anyone who's in field X have anything of value to say about field Y? And I was like, well, that's a profound naivete about science. I mean, it's very easy to get very fragmented and specialized in science, but there's this thing called cross-pollination. Right? So ideas that work really well, they might be really useful over here. You have to talk to each other. So I was like, this was absurd. And this is the same argument that Jerry Coyne used against Dennis Noble. Well, you might be a great physiologist, but butt out. We're doing evolution. Go away. Right? And etc. Questions about evolution and stuff like that. So that's the basic thrust of what I have to say. And I think I went over a little bit, but I hope you understand that it was the laptop. Anything else? Yes?
Did the atheists ask you any interesting questions?
Oh, some of them, yeah, they were fairly pointed. Some of them were just saying, well, I don't buy that, okay, maybe there's evidence for design, but it doesn't have to be God. And I was like, well, that's why they call it intelligent design. Because it doesn't necessarily invoke a divine thing. And what was it, another fellow was saying, well, why do they waste so much time, why do they waste so much time trying to do research without just applying for funding and get into mainstream science? I was like, you're kidding me. So it's like, if you want to get a research grant, someone has to review it. And the people that review it are the established researchers in that field. And so if you want, oh, I want to do research into design, what do you think is going to happen? Right? You got the job. No, kook. And by the way, don't give him a job. Right? So that was another thing. And then someone else was, he was praising Richard Dawkins' efforts to raise the profile of science, I guess to publicize science, to get science into the public mind. And I remember just saying, yeah, but there's good attention and bad attention, right? And I think he's bringing a lot of bad attention. I know so many researchers that are embarrassed to be associated with the science that Dawkins talks about. Many researchers, Christian and otherwise, they're just like, I wish this Dawkins fellow would just shut up. Right? He's making us look like a bunch of arrogant schmucks. So I remember those bits. I'm sure there was other things. That talk to the atheist group was a few years ago. Yeah, and so I did this talk. I actually recommended, how about I talk about something that may be a bit neutral instead of combative? Because there's something weird about the evolutionary thing. It's like it's shielded, and there's like all this suppression of trying to research into it. Did you have another question?
What happened to Stenberg? Because
I haven't followed up on what happened to him since I wrote this a few years back. Because this was a while. It was 2004,
wasn't it? And I heard the story from Stephen Meyer that Stenberg was never an intelligent design proponent. He was just a guy.
He was just an editor.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that if you look closely at all the reasons for the retraction, some of them was it was inappropriate that he handled the peer review process by himself. So they didn't mean that he did the peer review. It's just that he was an editor that he sent it out to the referees, and the referees came back and they said yes, and so it was okay. So apparently there's some procedural thing that he was supposed to have an associate editor stamp it or something, and so that didn't happen. So it just sounded like some stupid procedural thing, that they were looking for something that we can catch this guy out on and then get rid of him or something. You know. And there's piles of other examples as well. Some of the more disturbing ones, I think, is for professors that have laboratories that are established in their field. They start daring to question or criticize it or go in different directions that aren't approved of, and they get their funding yanked, and they start losing their positions in universities and stuff. That's a bit disturbing, especially for some people. I mean, so George, was becoming a professor easy? Did you have to do anything?
Well, I was 33 at the time, so I didn't know much then.
Oh wow, okay. I guess for many of the people that I know that
I worked very hard.
Yeah, for becoming a professor, I think that's probably why I'm not a professor, because I'm lazy. Right? I go home, I'm going to play video games, I don't want to do science. Right? It's a lot of work. And so for some of these people, when they become professors, and then all of a sudden have all that torn away from them, oh my gosh, that's awful. I mean, I might disagree with them, and they might be complete schmucks, but if they've earned it for a reason, right? And just to tear it away like that over some political thing, or because you dare to question evolution, that's just inappropriate. Yeah, right.
Is this the only area in science that where you have this strong denial of open discussion?
Oh yeah, suppression of discussion debate.
Yeah.
I really can't think of other stuff, but there are other examples where there's absurdity.
Global warming would be one.
Oh, they might be, yeah, true. But you know what comes to mind is when I did my thesis on gastrointestinal signaling. So it was apparently very controversial for over a century, this whole gastric signaling stuff. And there was a fellow, Alvarez, in the 20s. He wrote an article that had this fascinating statement in it that said, Why is it that all the textbooks and all the publications and all this stuff are declaring that what's causing these generating these signals to keep our guts moving? Why is it that everyone says that it's this when all the evidence points in the opposite direction? And it was all because there was just this establishment, there was this inertia that pushed everything into one direction. And even though not everyone, there was groups of people pushing it the other way, the evidence says this, it says this. And it took decades and decades and decades to push it another direction. So for some of it, I think it's just a matter of inertia, right? If it starts becoming part of textbooks, and it just starts rolling and keeps rolling. And so it may have, no deep philosophical implications. I don't know, do the guts have deep philosophical implications? I guess it depends on how much you ate, right? But so it's like there are some instances where it can be difficult to move the ship of science sometimes. And sometimes it's a good thing, like what they were talking about, the DNA stuff. But we don't want to just chuck this stuff because there's decades of information that says it's this. But now we've got some new evidence, and so we have to consider it, but we have to also keep in mind that there's a lot of evidence, there's counterweights as well. So, but at least in those instances, there is some discussion. Whereas with this, suppression of discussion, I guess it would be a global warming. That's a good example. Yeah. Anything else? Do you want to know more about calcium? Yeah.
Yeah, and for a Christian, it seems to me that evolution is used just as a tool to turn people away from a supernatural belief. And I'm not too bothered about the details of how true or untrue the very evolutionary theories that are put around, because I think for the Christian, they believe in something which is outside the natural world, and it's not subject to the natural world's processes for examining it.
Yeah,
So,
that's kind of what I was talking about, that
yeah,
inference
so,
of something else.
That is the sort of simple answer to me when I meet people like this. I don't really mind what they believe about evolution, but there is something outside. God is outside of time, for example.
Okay.
God set up the world that we're in now, but the next reality, we won't be using oxygen to move ourselves around heaven. There'll be that's a new reality. So why not just accept that?
It could very well be, I have no idea. Do you think they can apply to me getting grants? Can I get a different reality?
Well, it could well be that the powers of darkness are actually...
I don't know.
I think that is a very definite possibility.
Well, it could very well be, I don't know. For whatever reason, I ended up doing research. I wanted to teach, like I was talking with Marcia, right? I wanted to teach, that's why I did my PhD in maths. Because originally I was going to teach in the States, and then I came here and I was like, well, I'll do a PhD because then everyone told me to get a PhD and then teach at uni. Because I don't want to deal with secondary students. Right? And I just click really well with uni students. But honestly, I've had so many doors just close in my face to keep me from teaching. And I didn't want to do research, and I fell backwards into this research job at bioengineering. And it's been a struggle for me because I think I'm a much better teacher than a researcher. But so along the way, God has a way of challenging us. I was at one of the very first computational cell biology meetings in 2001 in the States, where I met Dennis Noble and I met Peter Hunter, and had no idea I'd be working for Peter Hunter. And it was interesting just how, because it was at the beginning of this whole branch, this whole division of science. So all the biologists were on one side of the room and all the mathematicians and physicists on the other, and they didn't really talk to each other. And so a mathematician would get up and I've created a model of a cow, it's a sphere. All the stuff goes in, and all the stuff comes out across the sphere, right? And the biologist goes, that's ludicrous, right? And I said, well, it's also because mathematicians and biologists are trained to see the world very differently. Mathematicians, we want to reduce and keep it simple. And biologists, they throw in the kitchen sink, everything's relevant. So it's taken time for the two to where they talk to each other and can coordinate with each other. And I've seen that process evolve, and now I've actually had some biologists, some clinicians have come to me and said, hey, can you help us? We're trying to figure out some neuronal thing or whatever. And I was like, yeah, sweet, let's go get money. Right? Yeah. So I think for some of it, it's like when you get in a new direction, but by the same token, it's hard to move the ship. I see some people with fascinating ideas for doing research stuff that have maybe some mathematical expertise that want to apply it to physiological systems, but there's no money in it because no one wants to see something transformational that might change everything for a century. No, they want to see like a clinical device in 6 weeks that they can use to cure cancer. Right? So there's all this immediate results. There's no long-term kind of sciencey stuff anymore. So I know I'm just getting on a soapbox. Blah, 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 science. Right? But I will say as a Christian and being aware of the supernatural, how many of you heard my testimony? So you know that, yeah, I'm aware of the supernatural world, right? That's why I became a Christian. And I didn't give one rip about evolution until my first pastor was like, look, evolution's a problem, you need to sort that out. I just did maths. I was like, I don't know anything about biology, I had no interest in biology, so I started taking biology classes. And so then I started reading up more on it, and then I was like, oh, evolution is kind of a crazy, I was told all this stuff in high school or as a freshman at uni, and I was like, I don't think I'd buy this. Because when I started digging up graduate level textbooks and research articles, there's all these question marks. Well, there's these huge holes. We don't know how this, we don't know how that. I was like, well, why didn't they tell me that? That's the interesting thing. Right? There's these question marks. There's these things that need to be researched, and that's what lured me to biology. And so actually when I would go to these conferences and I'd be talking to mathematicians or whatever, and they're like, so why are you here? Why are you interested in biology? And the typical response is money, right? Because there's funding, and so I'm just chasing funding. And so my response was, well, I became a Christian. And so I remember this one Russian fellow, this is not typical. Right? And of course it's the evolution thing, and I just started looking at it, and I got fascinated by cell biology. Yeah, so in many ways it's because I became Christian that I'm here, right? I wouldn't have done the PhD with James if it wasn't for that. Okay, so a little bit after 4.
So do you have any comments on the sort of intersection of biology and physics? And I'm thinking in terms of someone like Michael Denton and his Nature's Destiny,
there's the
that sort of approach.
The anthropic principle stuff that he talks about. Oh, that's a whole nother ball of wax. We could do a talk on that.
I think it's a very fascinating point.
Yeah. And so I've been reading some other stuff recently as well that supports that from different angles. But yeah, one of the things that I found interesting, because I have many atheist friends, how they would just hand wave so many things, it was just a coincidence. And I was like, well, okay, but when you have coincidence, the improbabilities really start to stack up, and so it just makes me wonder. But they just kind of hand wave things. It's just a coincidence.
The fascinating thing is Michael Denton still agnostic of the Parliament and these incidents.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was an interesting text. Yeah, I enjoyed reading that. So I think if we wanted to talk about anthropic principle, we could do a talk. And so if you guys have things that you'd like George or myself or Andrew to like dig into, just let us know. Just email us or put yourself on the list. Right? So we can broadcast out an email that says, tell us what you want to know. Right? So you can respond. So we're pretty good at researching things. I've done it before. I gave you a PhD. Right. Yes.
Question. For someone who's doesn't do science,
Right.
trying to talk to somebody else who doesn't do science but is a full-on atheist and is very much any materials or resources we could direct them to when we're talking to them?
I would think that there's many resources here for that kind of thing, like Thinking Matters. There's like an apologetics group, right? And then there's the American one. That's the Stand to Reason, right? So they had a speaker last year that Thinking Matters brought in, and they had all these tactics. Yeah.
Answers in Genesis.
Oh, Answers in Genesis. Yeah. So there's many resources. So actually, what I could do is, if you give us your email, I can send out some of these resources. Yeah. I think we did that for the Uni Challenge thing. So I still got those somewhere, not necessarily here, but somewhere in here. Yeah. So just email us and we can get you some stuff. Yeah. And you know what? I would say the most important thing to do is pray. Right? Because for some people, they're in a place where they don't care how much evidence you throw at them. And in fact, you're just going to make them angry. Right? That's how I see some of them as well. You're not ready. One of the examples that I talked about for the Uni Challenge was the difference between my Russian office mate and a Turkish a PhD student, where the Russian office mate, when we were talking, had a coffee, and it came out that I'm Christian, and she went off on this tirade. It's like only someone who's brainwashed and raised as a Christian must believe Christianity. No one who's intelligent can possibly believe Christianity. She just I'm like, I disagree with you. It's just like, it doesn't matter what you think. You just keep shooting and shooting. And I just remember thinking, I think you're the one that's brainwashed, right? But so then I didn't share the gospel with her. She didn't seem receptive.
Oh, yes, we're not over.
Yeah. But by contrast, I mean, a lot of people knew I was Christian because I don't hide it, but I don't like wear a family-sized Bible on my chest. Right, so this Turkish student, she was a very pretty petite little thing, and she was so striking because when she talked, she had a voice like this. It's just so striking. It's like, oh. And she came in my office one day and she goes, "I would like you to tell me about Jesus. How do I become a Christian?" I'm like, oh. So I shared the gospel with her. And so the opportunities, right? And so sometimes the opportunities are just not there. And the seed's just going to bounce off. And so you just have to pray. Right? Because ultimately it is a spiritual thing. Because I mean, I've shared the gospel. I've shared very logical, laid out, arguments. I had a girl delivering pizza or some dang thing, just getting signatures for magazines years ago, and I don't know, I just shared the gospel with her. And I was just, it's so simple, man, it's just this. And she goes, "Oh wow, how do I get this?" And I'll never forget seeing this veil of darkness descend over her face, and this anger. And then she was like, she had no interest, and she just like almost ran away. This is a supernatural thing, right? So you can be as logical and rational as you want. And you can point out, look, there's something wrong with the evolution. And you can point out all the logical stuff. But ultimately, it's a supernatural thing. I think I should stop there. I said, thanks to everyone for coming and for listening and tolerating.